All right, good. I'd like to call to order tonight's Finance Committee meeting dated February 27th, 2024. If we could do a quick round of introductions for everybody watching. We'll start with board members over here. Jeff Hanley,
Megan Carlson.
Jack Pitteroff.
Tony B.
Chris McLaughlin, and we'll do staff members. Dr. Pat.
Pat Hopkins, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
Jerry McGuire, Director of Technology.
Nate Stubbert, Athletic Director.
All right, good. Thank you. We have 3 items on tonight's agenda. Are there any changes?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
could
Pat.
we please take up item B, the athletic game workers, the rate proposal? And then we can look at the budget.
Does anybody have any objections to making that change? All right, good. Seeing none, we'll take up item B first, athletic game workers.
So we took up this item, this came forward to Finance Committee in the fall, where we had a staff member who's been a game worker, who requested that we increase the hourly rate by $10 per hour across the board. And so it was decided by this committee that a small group of us would go back, take a look at what other area school districts pay, and to really do a deep analysis to determine what we're paying across the board for all sports. So I've just handed out to you a summary of what we currently pay for every single position. And then there is a proposal, but I'm gonna turn this over to Nate. Nate has done a lot of this work, put this together, and of course, he works most closely with the game workers, so.
So first of all, game workers are an essential part of our athletic program. We have anywhere from ticket takers to scoreboard operators, scoreboard keepers, flaggers at volleyball games, site coordinators when I'm not around. So there's a whole variety of people that help out putting athletic events together. So without them, we wouldn't be able to have our athletic events, which I'm greatly appreciating. So I spent a lot of time, and Pat and Andrea and Ginger spent a lot of time going over what the game workers are currently being paid and trying to, like what Pat said, compare it to what other school districts are being paid and also what minimum wage is. And so there are so many variables. I could sit here and go over this for hours. But essentially, the proposal that we put together and trying to stay fair to the game workers, also keeping in mind what minimum wage could potentially do in the future. And I kind of put together like a tiered approach on the last page on the back, essentially the proposed hourly rates. And that was the other thing is right now, game workers are being paid per game, which is really difficult because sometimes games last 2-3 hours, and let's say they're getting paid $30. Now they're automatically below the minimum wage amount. So in order to stay consistent with what minimum wage would be, I recommended that we change it to an hourly rate. So they get paid per hour. So they're gonna have to fill out a timesheet electronically, and it will be per hour. So it's pretty consistent across the board. So this is what I proposed on the back. And I kind of did a tiered approach where the site coordinator would be in place of the athletic director if I'm not around, or if I need help because I'm in multiple places, I have to be in multiple places at the same time. Then underneath there, the varsity scoreboard operators would be the most. That's probably the next position that has the most level of responsibility. And then scorebook keepers. And so on and so forth. So one thing that's on here that we did talk about at the last meeting, which I did not update, is the ticket takers and the varsity baseball pitch count. Those would have to be moved up to $16 per hour to stay ahead of minimum wage. So that's essentially what I've put together. One thing that I did want to make an adjustment on is I had sent out a proposal via email after the last time we met. And on the first page under scorebook keepers, I proposed that the only scorebook keepers that we pay for are varsity volleyball and varsity boys and girls basketball. Most of those other sports have managers and volunteers that could potentially help. And I feel like we don't need to pay, because we have so many sports, and if we went across the line and paid scorekeepers for every single sport, or scorebook keepers for every single sport, we'd be spending a ton of money. And I feel like varsity basketball and varsity volleyball are very stressful, high speed sports where somebody who's keeping the book is going to be under a lot of stress, and an official book needs to be kept for those games. Other sports like soccer, lacrosse, baseball, softball, those are relatively slow paced. A lot of times it might be one of the players that's keeping the book in the dugout or on the sidelines. So that was the other recommendation that I made, trying to, keep this in mind fiscally as well.
Which two sports again, Nate? I'm sorry, I forgot.
What's that?
Which two sports?
Volleyball,
Basketball and
Volleyball and basketball.
Thank you,
yes.
sorry.
And these hourly rates that I came up with are pretty consistent with what an average game time would be per hour that they're making now. So we don't want to have them be making less than what they're making now. But we also kept in mind kind of on average what they would be making per hour if we were to break down every single game, like I said, because they are being paid per game as it stands right now.
Yeah, any questions for Nate?
Oh.
Gotcha.
Do you have an estimate of, is this gonna increase the overall cost? Or are you just trying to stay neutral? Is that what you're trying to do?
It might, I don't have an answer for that, because in order for me to have an answer for that, this has to be approved, and then I have to go back in and plug in on my spreadsheet what that would do to my overall game workers budget. By eliminating some of the things that we're currently paying for right now, that might help and stay neutral. Certainly not, the intent isn't to increase it at all. The intent is to have an approach where it's fair and equitable for everybody who's helping out. I also, in the past, have had a hard time attracting people to work games. So I want to make sure that that's attractive for them to come and work as well. So.
Have you talked to all these people about this? I mean, are they more interested in getting paid by the hour than by the game?
I haven't talked to the game workers about this now.
So the reason we decided to move to paying people by the hour, Jeff, is to make sure that those games that ran extra innings and long, that we weren't in violation of minimum wage laws. This is supposed to be budget neutral. You really won't know until we see how long games are taking to complete.
But we, in addition to the three of us, we also include Ginger Shaw. And Ginger Shaw is not only our payroll clerk, or was our payroll clerk. She also is a game a scorekeeper, right, and a coach. And she's very, very involved. And so we wanted her insights as to whether she thought what we were paying was appropriate. And this proposal has her full endorsement as well. She felt it was reasonable and appropriate.
True.
All right, so we won't know the answer until you can plug things in.
And then it's a best guess, because now they're being paid by the hour. There are sometimes volleyball matches sometimes they last a half hour, sometimes we've had some that last 2 hours and 45 minutes. So there are so many different variables in this. It's really.
What's your feel though? I mean,
I don't think my feeling is I don't think it's going to increase the amount too much. That's the hope. But I won't know for sure until we at least have a year through it.
Any other questions, any discussions? Pat, you need a motion to take this to the
I would-
board.
Like a motion, yes.
Anybody willing to make the motion?
We make a motion that we forward this proposal to the full board with our approval.
Second.
Any other discussion? All's in favor? Opposed? Good, thank you, Nick.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate you moving me to head of the line.
You're welcome. All right, that brings us to A.
Yeah, let's talk about the budget. Before I hand this over to Andrea, however, I want to just remind folks that these are very preliminary numbers. Andrea has been working around the clock to get this budget in place, updated, while also doing payroll, because of course we said that Ginger left. So it's taken a bit more time than in years past as a result, understandably so. So I want to be really clear, administrators, we haven't had any time yet to start our work. We have a meeting scheduled for us to start really doing a complete analysis. So what we have done, or what we have looked at, is the document that I will share with you now. You've received it in the past. It's the class size, looking at class sizes for next year, projected class sizes. It's something I create every single year. And so what I do is I look at current enrollment. This is as of the January enrollment. And I look at the current staffing. I roll it over into next year. And I compare it with our class size policy, your class size policy, to make sure that we're in line with that. We do have a little bit of an issue that is going to result in the time being. Things may change as we go through the budget process. In being outside of your policy for class sizes at the kindergarten level.
She's copies. Do you have copies for me?
Yeah, I gave two.
Chris is keeping everything.
Oh, I gave you two copies
Yeah, I
of
gotcha,
each, so
I
one for
gotcha.
Chris and one for Hannah.
Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So what I've done in terms of kindergarten is I tried to do a projection. How many students do we have enrolled in pre-K? Then how many additional students enroll into kindergarten above and beyond our pre-K numbers? That way we could kind of get an estimate for the number of kindergarten students that we expect to enroll and start our year at. So if you look at this, you will see that at LER, I am looking at a potential enrollment of 53 kindergarten students next year, 39 at Pittston Randolph, and 44 at Helen Thompson. So Helen Thompson has historically had 2 teachers. Pittston Randolph has historically had 2 teachers. And LER historically has had 4 teachers, although this year they only had 3, okay? But as I look at these numbers, we cannot have a class size in kindergarten of 22 at Helen Thompson. We cannot have a class size of 20 and 19 at Pittston Randolph. One, those are the smallest classrooms in the entire building. This year, they started the year off with 18 and they now have 20. Is too much. We've actually tried to pull in an ed tech to provide some additional support for the teachers. And looking at LER, with 3 teachers, we would be at 18, which is the max for class size policy. What this doesn't reflect also is that we are already, we know of 44 students in CDS who are coming into MSAD11 with some type of IEP. And usually that increases between now and the start of the school by another 12 students, I would say, 10, 12 students. So as we think not only of the class size, I'm really thinking as well about the increased needs of the students. And the more we can identify the needs, support the students earlier on, the better and more successful they will be as they get older. So when you go back to this other document and you look at class size policy and you look at next year, you will see that at LER, for example, I currently have 3 listed, but I'm on the fence about that one. I'm really on the fence about that because it's really at 18. And if we have more students enter, and again, that's where we have some of our higher need students, then I am worried about the impact to those students and the challenge for the staff to truly be able to meet the needs of the students. If you look at Helen Thompson, again, I'm proposing that we add another teacher there. So we'll have three kindergarten teachers, and then 3 at Pittston Randolph as well. Now, at Pittston Randolph and at Helen Thompson, it means that our class size will be lower than policy. But the other option, of course, is that we exceed policy. There's no middle ground because we have all of these community schools kind of back to, if we only had one, I could level these out. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. But beyond that, I don't see any other significant changes at the elementary schools in terms of staffing. At the middle school and the high school, we are seeing a decrease. At the middle school, we have a much smaller class coming in. So we're looking at a reduction of about 24 students. So we are engaging in conversations about what does that look like in terms of staffing. At the high school, then while the number looks consistent to this year, keep in mind, not long ago, we were at 600, we're at 620, right? So really, that has dropped significantly. So Lauren has started the student course sign up a month earlier than was historically done. So I'm working with her, she's working with her team, and I will have some preliminary staffing levels soon, okay? So knowing that we've reduced numbers, there could be a corresponding reduction there. But questions on staff and student enrollment projections? All right, so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Andrea so that Andrea can share with you the current state of the budget. One more thing, before I hand it over to you, is in the development of this budget, in conversations that I had with board leadership, there was a request that the board really wanted to see all of the requests put forth by staff administration. What do you think we really need, all right? In order to meet the changing needs of our student body, our numbers may be going down, but the needs are only increasing. What do you feel that you need and would want? That's what this includes, all right? So I know it's a high number once we look at it, and of course, it's not a number that will go out to the public. I mean, certainly that's not realistic. But it's really important for you as a board to understand what our staff and our administration is feeling that we need, and then we can talk about why there's a request for some of those items. And administrators will begin attending these meetings next month. So you'll be able to ask them directly as well, okay? All right, I'm done, Andrea.
So when Pat said that this budget was hot off the press, she wasn't kidding. I was looking at it again today, and I've looked at it several times. And you'll be happy to know that before 3 o'clock today, the budget was $1.1 million higher. That I found something in the budget that I had put in and fat fingered, so I was happily able to cut that. Needless to say, I was estimating rubbish for this building to be $1.1 million for next year. That has since been removed. I have updated. I guarantee you there are no more $1 million errors. And I found it. Well, it was such a large number. I thought it was a department total. I couldn't have imagined that I had a single entry, but sure enough, it's what it was. So I was happy to let Pat know that we reduced the budget from the last time I shared it with her by 1.1 million.
Good job, Andrea.
I know, just a sweep of a pen. So what I was going to share, but I'm not quite sure that I can do two things at once. So what you have in front of you is As Pat said, a copy of the expenditure articles with the budget where it now stands. So you can see that the budget is up from last year's approved budget by 17% or 5.1 million. The highest being special ed and then facilities maintenance. So those two, you can see the percentage increases of all the expenditure articles as the state requires us to break down our budget. So that is why our budgets are broken down in this fashion. Any questions about the expenditure articles? I then wanted to give you a very rough overview of where the increases were. This is how I happened upon the $1.1 million. I was looking for large chunks of money, and obviously 1.1 million was pretty easy to find once you're looking for that. So I've grouped the increases by a few things. The first being salary. So the overall increase in our budget to salaries is 1.8 million, exclusive of taxes. It's just the salary figure. That's what I gave you. And then I gave you a further breakdown, what is included in that $1.8 million. These are the new positions that included the things that the staff said that we needed. Is that how you phrased it, Pat? Needed? Needed. So it includes new positions, of which these are all new positions, and positions that are being transferred from our federal ESSER grant. So you'll see 3.5 positions that were transferred in. 2 social workers, an instructional coach, and a half-time instructional support person. Any questions about that portion? The next portion is benefits, and our total benefits overall are increased by $900,000. And then I spun out the large ticket items. So the first being the new Maine Paid Family Leave Act, of which we've discussed in previous finance committee meetings. The state is passing a paid family medical leave, and requiring districts to send 1% beginning January 1st, 2025, which is included in this budget. So that is what you see is an increase of $202,000. That represents 1% of all the salaries in this budget. Questions? Health insurance. Health insurance is budgeted at 10%. As a reminder, last year we had a 0% increase. I don't anticipate that again. I saw our mod rate. It was relatively good, but there are other factors that factor in with mod rate. I'm hopeful, but not hopeful enough to think that it will come in at 0%. So we usually budget around 10%. This includes both the 10% increase on the insurance itself, as well as staff changes that they've made throughout the year. So if somebody's gone from 2-person to family or back and forth, that is what this represents. And for you to know, each 1% equates now to about $41,000. So if I cut 10%, if we had a 0%, I'd be able to cut $410,000. So that's a chunk. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind for reference.
And would you remind committee members when we should have a sense of what our percentage will be?
So yes, that is always very late. They will set the max. They will set the max amount the last Monday in March. I don't know what that date is, but that is always around that they set the max percentage. So at that time, we can expect to be able to reduce hopefully. And then after that, they confer with the MEABT to see what if the MEABT is going to buy down the increase, and they continue to negotiate until they come up with the increase for each school individually. So every school, as a reminder, years ago, we used to all share the same pool, and then the state got involved, and as a result, each of the school districts was pulled apart. So each of us now is our own separate rate pool. So everything that happens with staff is regarding their use of health insurance is reflected in our rate, as well as other factors as well. Questions? So the next one is main PERS. So main PERS is paid to those people who are covered under the main state, the main public employee retirement system. So every employee in this district is either main PERS or Social Security. Main PERS only covers school administrators, the superintendent, as well as teachers, ed techs 2s and ed techs 3s. Everyone else is a Social Security position. And there's no way of buying in, it's just the way that main PERS is set up. So what you see is the increase to those employees who are covered under main PERS. Unlike last year, there is no increase to the employer amount. It will stay the same amount. I believe it's 4.17, please don't quote me, as last year. So that's good news, because last year we had an increase on that amount. FICA, Social Security, Medicare, whatever you want to call that, that's the increase on wages to those employees who are covered under Social Security. Cash in lieu is the increase, those individuals who either went from picking up health insurance to cash in lieu. I would say that's what most of it is, because the cash in lieu is only half of single. That's what most of these are, people who we had budgeted, or maybe new employees, we had budgeted as taking health insurance or expecting they would. And then a lot of our new younger teachers take cash in lieu. And once they reach the max age of 26, they go off their parents and then they come on to ours. So what you're seeing now is a reflection of some of those younger staff members who are hiring and who are picking up the cash in lieu option. Questions? And just so that you know, cash in lieu is only available it's not available to everybody. It's only available to those collective bargaining agreements that have the cash in lieu option. So that's not everyone. The next thing that you see, the next number that you see is tuition to special purpose private schools. So this is a $682,000 increase over the amount that it was this year. And as a reminder, those are those students that we cannot provide services to in district, either because of staff or needs, that we have to tuition out to a special purpose private schools. And you've heard us discuss on many occasions how expensive these placements are. They're typically between $75,000 and $100,000 per placement, depending upon the institution and the child. So that is what you see as an increase in the number of placements. Questions?
Is that based on our current numbers or projected?
That is what they are projecting based on what current needs are and incoming for next year.
And we have some incoming CDS students that are already placed. So I think there may be 3 CDS students already placed that will.
And you're projecting 3 more then, essentially.
Well, of the 682, I think 3 are just from preschool or CDS.
So what's the baseline that we're adding to? I mean, this is the additional cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the baseline?
Ask again another way, Jeff. I'm not sure I asked.
So I think, Jeff, this is the baseline increase is 5.1 million.
It's on the expenditure article.
And I imagine, Andrea, the list we have here is 4.7. That 400,000 is probably collectively bargained stuff that we don't have a choice over.
Well, the other 400,000, it's a lot of little things adding up to 400,000. There's no more. I ran out of time and there's no more big pockets of money other than the $1.1 million
Because
rubbish bin.
I don't see COLAs and increased salaries in the list here. The collectively bargained salaries for next year that everybody gets a raise in July 1.
Everything is reflected on this. So out of the $1.8 million
Salaries.
increase to salaries includes all of
Okay.
the negotiations to the CBAs. Of that 1.8 million, 805,000 is the new positions.
Okay. Good.
Follow me?
Yep, so you see that, Jeff, that,
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay.
But I thought I
Thanks.
You
understood Jeff is asking, if we're talking about just tuition, what is the increase to what we currently pay for tuition?
I don't know that rate's been set yet. So I think she's either using this year's rate and adding additional placements.
But if we look to our special ed budget, and our budget is about 300 pages long, so it would take a little.
That's why I'm asking.
We
'Cause
would have to
I'll never find-
research that. But in our budget, if we find special ed, when we find special ed, I just don't know if I can do it this moment. That we can tell you exactly how much we paid this year, how much we budgeted
And
this year.
this is an increase to that amount.
Correct.
That was what I was asking.
Mhm. So do you remember at the beginning of the meeting, I said I shared with you a large document? You will see every single line in our budget, the 100-page document that I shared with you, you will see the increase in every line. So you'll see, when you pull up that document, you will see what we're budgeting for next year, what we budgeted for this year, the difference and the percentage difference. And then you will see what we've spent to date in this year, as well as last year and the year before. So there's like a history there, as well as you can see any changes, which is what I was looking at when I was trying to pick up with the overview, what was the largest increases of the overall budget. Sorry, that was wordy. Did I answer your?
You answered my question. Fine.
Okay,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Sometimes I just go on and on. Capital improvement. So last meeting, for those of you who were here, we discussed the wonderful opportunity that we have a chance to participate in, the community funding project. And at that meeting, Gabe gave or provided to the committee quotes for the project as decided upon or as identified. I guess that's a better way. And as a reminder, the legislature may require a 20% copay on our behalf. I don't know how else to refer to it, or 20% of it being matched. That's a perfect word, Megan, thank you. So at last finance committee meeting, the committee decided that we would include the match in the budget. So what you see is the $530,000 match to the $2.6 million project, that estimate.
And I will go back, because this is like, there's a 2-year lag, I will go back and confirm whether the amount really needs to be in next year's budget or whether it would be the following year budget. So if we don't need to have it, there's $500,000 that we've just saved.
And that was up to 20%, right?
Up to 20%.
Right, 20% is the max that we would have to pay.
Correct.
So it could be less when it comes back.
Mhm. So the next item that you see is the 5-year capital improvement projects. So the $449,000 is the amount that he has in his budget over the current year's budget in capital improvement projects. It is not his entire capital improvement projects. And I did not list out every capital improvement project that he had listed. If you would like, I'd be happy to share that 5-year capital improvement project with the board, or at least put it someplace we can all see. but that's what that
Correct me if
represents.
I'm wrong, but the big one was the catwalk, right?
Yes.
Correct. Yep.
And everyone should have already received a copy of that, right? And
I think it's on the shared folder in Google Doc. During budget season, I really try to make sure that I have everything available to you electronically, so you're not having to keep everything.
Remember the total for that?
The catwalk,
300, wasn't
Yeah.
it? 280, 300,000, something like that.
I don't know if I have this. No.
No.
I can tell you
I'm
at the end
looking
of
just
this
a second.
meeting. For whatever reason, I'm not
You're fine.
connecting to the
Keep going.
internet, so, sorry. So the next item on the list that you see is transportation for special purpose private schools. Sorry. So in addition to the tuition for these schools, we sometimes have to provide a separate driver to transport students to and from the school. The $102,000 is the amount that special ed estimates the cost to be to transport these students or new placements to the school or schools. Curriculum budget. So these are just, I just looked at their budget. So starting with everything that wasn't salaries and benefits, and I just gave you the increase to their budget because there's a lot of things that make up the increase. So the curriculum budget is up 87,000. The same thing with the technology budget, that is up 73,000. The next item that you see is property and casualty insurance. You see that's up 42,000. And I just want to remind you, so part of that increase for next year is the amount that we were short for this year. Do you remember that conversation? Where we were informed after our budget, or actually as we were renewing in July, that there was a 25% increase. And I never budget 25%. So I budgeted this year's, and then I plussed it up another 15%, knowing that we are going out to bid. And one would expect our bids to be good, with the exception that we have a $500 million claim for the high school.
500 million?
No, 500,000, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, 500 million.
It's like,
It's been a
okay,
long day.
I was never given that
500,
estimate.
half
All
a
right.
million.
Yeah.
I should have just said $500,000. So the last time we went out to bid, we had another $500,000 claim. One of the walls, the high school gym actually moved, and that was another $500,000 claim. So I am preparing to go out to bid. However, bids will not be in until our budget is approved. So that is what is in the budget for next year. And as you all remember, I don't know, for those of you who have seen your property and casualty insurance bills, we've all experienced increases. So this is reflective of those conversations. The bus lease, the great news is our bus lease only increased 35,000. I think that's fabulous. They do all the maintenance on the buses. They're just the best. So basically we pay a cost per mile, and every year they up the cost of the mile because as the buses get older, obviously there's more maintenance for the buses. So they do everything from tires to, it's soup to nuts. So we don't have to have a maintenance department. We don't have to have a mechanic. We don't have to have a bus garage, and we don't have to keep in stock everything that we need to repair our buses. So this is, I think this is a great deal. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. The school resource officer, I received the quote from the city of Gardner for our school resource officer, and the quote for next year increased by 15,000. Next item is special ed extended school year. That is the special ed program that we're required to run during the summer months. Their expected budget for next year is $11,000 more than this year, and that's what you see. Professional development, there was a request from an administrator, probably the high school administrator, to increase the professional development at the high school. I was not given a number, so I want you to know that this is a number that I chose, and it is not reflective of any just conversations. I just wanted to capture something. The next item is water sewers. So the water, we received letters this year from both the water district and the sewer district that they were both going to be increasing, I believe by 15 and 20% each. And what you see is reflective of those notifications that I received. What you do not see in this budget are the conversations below. IDEA, Title I and Title II. So until we receive our estimated grants for next year, we will not know whether our existing staff will fit in our grant allocation.
These are federal.
These are federal grants, and we typically don't get those till later. So for now, I've left those all in the federal monies. And if we don't have enough to pay for that staff, there'll have to be additional conversations. So that's IDEA, which is local entitlement, which is special ed. Title I, which is our Title I staff, servicing reading and math. And Title II, which is a class size reduction teacher. So you have either teachers or ed techs, combination in all of those grants. Energy, electricity. There are no changes to energy, electricity in this budget. I am going out to bid. As you know, I rely heavily on Competitive Energy Services, CES out of Portland. They're energy experts. They do our bids. We need to make sure that we don't go out to bid too early. Charlie and I are talking about going out to bid for unleaded propane, diesel, for next year. So we're going to be looking at that, and I will be making the adjustments as those bids come in. So as of right now, those are status quo. The good news is I still need to have conversation with him, but some of the increases that we saw last year, or the outrageous bills that we saw last year for natural gas, I do not see that coming to fruition in our expenditures. In other words, our therm rate for natural gas is much lower. I shared that with you, but what's the company? Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Natural gas.
Summit.
Summit, thank you. Summit had also increased its delivery, and we don't have a full year. And therms is a funny thing, because the only provider that we have, all right, let me back up. So like electricity with natural gas, there are two components, delivery and supply. Delivery is Summit. There is only one company that supplies natural gas to Gardner. We have no choice. If we were 20 miles up the road, we would have options. We do not have options where we are, and I do not see us getting any options, because I don't see any natural gas expanding anytime in the near future. But I could be wrong, but I wouldn't bet on it. So we have one supplier. So last year, budget year, the cost per therm was outrageous. So we budgeted this year expecting that it would stay the same. I will have a conversation with Charlie to see what that looks like in the year. There's a lot of things going on in the world that affects. The energy markets are very volatile, and we can do the best that we can, but I intend to have that conversation to see whether or not we can take some savings. It certainly won't be $5 million in savings, but I'm hoping that we can make some changes to what we're budgeting, at least for natural gas. We budgeted some pretty thrifty amounts. Questions? What's up, Jack?
You mentioned there was no natural gas expansion, which just like was begging for a science joke, that's all.
Sorry, I thought you had a question.
Nope.
Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out. I thought you were too afraid to ask a question. All right.
Never.
Um, Sorry. What is also not in here is money for the proposed performance contract. So at one of our previous finance committee meetings, we brought in here Tom Seekins, and Tom Seekins reviewed, he's with, I want to see, energy consultant, ECS or ESC. Anyway, doesn't matter. We are in the process of going out to bid for, or actually requesting qualifications for an energy audit. There is no money in here if we have to make a payment next year. So I just want you to be aware that if we do that, and if the project's done and payments would start, we would need to add additional money in this budget for that.
We also don't have any money for engineering architectural firms. We are also going out for RFQ, seeking some qualifications. Now, we would want them to begin their work prior to this budget, but there is no guarantee that the work would be completed prior to the start of this budget, and there's no money in there for that, other than what,
We have
15,000?
$15,000 that we always budget for architect, but that won't cover what we're talking
That will not cover it. I would expect it will be significantly higher than that, 80, 100.
So the last time is fuel transportation. Again, I discussed that when I discussed CES. So this represents 4.7 of the $5.1 million that the rest is scattered throughout in much smaller pockets. Any questions overall? Okay, moving right along. So the next thing, or the next piece of paper that I gave you, or the next sheet that I gave you, is the requested budget worksheet that I give you every year. It's what we look at to see what we're passing along to taxpayers, and I'm just going through the motions. Again, this is not our final budget, this is a first peek, but I wanted you to see the effect that this budget would have. So I'm going to go over it, reading it so that I want to make sure that everyone knows how to read this document. So the first thing I'm going to go over on the left side of the document is miscellaneous revenue. So this is revenue that we have, or that we're anticipating receiving for the next year's budget, that actually reduces the amount that we then move forward to, or then gets passed to the locals. So the carry forward remains the same, or based on, because I don't have any other direction from you. The carry forward amount is the same amount as this year and previous years. We talked about carry forward last year in great depth. We may want to do it again. That would be your prerogative. I don't see that changing, but for the time being, I did not change carry forward one way or the other. The state agency client, that is based on, so state agency client, SAC money, are wards of the state who are residing in our district that we request reimbursement from the state. So they are wards. Do they still call them that?
Still a technical term.
Yeah, it is. So, but
I don't know what else to call them. Children in state custody, there we go. That's what I'll call them.
foster. Yeah,
Yes,
foster
thank you, even better. So those are students, so based on last year's and where we are this year, I project income of 56,000. Tuition estimates, the good news is that our tuition rate went up this year. I don't even want to quote it, but it did go up. And I was happy with the amount that it went up. So I slightly decreased the tuition estimate because we are losing 2 special ed kids who are very expensive from another district. So as a reminder, the tuition estimate are those students who attend our schools who are not subsidizable students, which means they do not reside in our communities. So most of our tuition students currently come from RSU two, who you know does not have a high.
RSU 12.
12. Been a long day. That does not have a high school. So that's where the bulk of our students have. We also have another tuition student that the parents pay directly. It's a direct bill. So that is what this is based on. The good news is that the interest that I am booking in revenue has increased substantially. I think last year I had maybe 12,000 in here. You will see that now. We have 240,000 that I anticipate in interest on our accounts, having consolidated all of our accounts with Kennebec Savings that is paid well. Even the schools that have their school checking accounts now with KSB are now seeing interest. So they are delighted as well. And even our scholarship account is earning $1,000 in interest a month. So it's very encouraging. So that was a great move on our part. Miscellaneous revenue, it's never more than 5,000. We don't get a lot of we don't get a lot of miscellaneous revenue. It's just things that plop in. Generally, it's around plop. Generally monies we receive, it's never a lot. It typically hovers around 5,000. That's where I'm leaving it. I don't see anybody wanting to drop off any large checks to us just because, but who knows? Transportation fees, those are the fees that we pay for co-curricular field trips, but we are reimbursed by the not Gardner teachers, GETA,
Local parent groups.
there you go, PTGs, PTAs, sorry. Athletic gate receipts, 18,000, so that represents roughly $3,000 or $4,000 from the musical, and the rest are gate receipts from football and basketball. Typically, that's what we get in. I know that I looked at this year's athletic receipts, and I thought they looked a little light, but I left it at 18,000, which is what I typically budget at. I can see into the high school student activity account, and I can see what she has. I've requested that monies be sent to this office because they collected at that office. And when I checked, there was only 10,000, which is larger than normal, but I am not changing that. And then the final thing on is the CES, so competitive energy services that I talked about, renewable energy credits. I booked 20,000. I'm not going to change that. I don't think that we're getting it, but there are a lot more projects coming online, and if it doesn't come to fruition, I'm not too terribly worried about it. But I'm going to book it as revenue. There are other credits coming from that project that I discussed at our one of our recent finance meetings. Do you remember that conversation, us being part of that consortium, the solar and water, the water
Geothermal?
projects? No, water. Hydro, thank you. Yes. So yes, we get money from those projects that have gone online. So that's what that is. So in the next section, the total combined allocation, ED 279, you will see that these numbers come right off the ED 279 that we looked at last meeting. You will see the mill expectation has been lowered, but as I mentioned in that meeting, your valuation has increased. I would say substantially, requiring, which is then requiring a higher than last year local contribution. I'll talk about that below, but what I want you to take away is the mill expectation is less than last year, but it's the amount to locals that they are required to raise is increasing. So you will see from the ED 279 to the far right that they have estimated, the state being they have estimated our total operating budget based on their calculations to be 23,863,016.24. And if you multiply the mill rate by the valuation, our required local contribution is 7,658,677.99. And if you subtract that from their total calculated operating budget of 23 million and change, you get the state contribution of 16,204,338.25, which is about 150,000 more than this year. And that exact figure we discussed at last meeting, I just don't have it in front of me. So the column on the right, this year's approved budget, next year's requested as it now stands, is an increase of the 5,128,000, 17.04, less the miscellaneous revenue of 1,997,000, leaves a net budget to be funded. So if you subtract out the state contribution and the local required contribution, the additional local is 9,372,641.50. Everyone see where I am? It's just math. We all love math. The first colored section below in pink, what you'll see is the valuation according to last year's ED 279. That's the one where you see 22, 21, 20. It's a 3-year average. That valuation, that state valuation calculated by main revenue is 1,056,383,334. And the valuation calculated this year for the years 23, 22, and 21 total 1,156,899,999. And then what you see is each town's percentage of the total. So you see, actually what you see is the percentage increase for valuation of each town. And then the next column over, you see the town's percentage of the total. Follow me? Okay, so the next section, required local contribution, it breaks out each town's local contribution based on their percent of total state valuation. So if you take that 7,658,677.99 that we talked about above, and you multiply, for example, Gardner, 36.73%, you get their required contribution, or required local contribution rather, is 2,812,727.66. And then if you take the additional local from above, which is 9,372,641.50, and you multiply it by that same percentage, you see that their portion of the additional local is 3,442,198.26 for Gardner's total contribution of 6,254,925.92. If you did the same for the others, those are the figures. The last colored section you see below is the amount that we passed to the municipalities this year. And based on this budget, that the amount requested that would be passed along. As you can see, it's an increase of 4,756,655.18, or a percentage increase of 38.75%.
Which you're gonna magically make into.
Yeah,
a
I'm gonna
lower
find
number.
another rubbish.
It will be lower.
Yes.
I pulled up last year's worksheet, Andrea, and I was just looking at the state valuation last year. And so in Gardner, last year it went up 5.65. So if you add that to 8.66, I mean, we're looking at roughly, say, a 14% increase, right? And in, or even 15, when you round that up. Pittston last year had a 6%, and you add that to 9, again, 15%. Randolph was at 7% last year. So it's like 13.5%, and West Gardner was 6%. And once you start rounding up, it's almost like an 18%
Yep.
increase over 2 years. So as we think about the amount of money that's being asked of taxpayers, it's shifting considerably because of these valuation increases.
So one of the documents that I passed out at I think it was the last meeting that we were at, it basically had, it came from the Department of Education's website, and it basically took the valuation for FY24, the valuation for FY25, and the percentage change. And then it took per pupil the year before, and then per pupil for this year, and then the percentage change. And then it calculated a per pupil per valuation. It's a very interesting spreadsheet. And what we noticed, I think we were in this room, that we were one of the few districts who had a percentage change in valuation that was in double digits. When I was scanning down, most of them were single digits. I don't know what's going on here, but our valuation in these 4 communities is increasing, and as a result, it's driving up the amount that locals are required to pay through this funding formula. So Pat's absolutely right.
Right, does Maine Revenue do these evaluations?
So the biggest question that I get every year is, why aren't you using the town valuation? Because statute requires that the state of Maine, the Department of Education, use the Maine state valuation. The Maine state valuation is supposed to be the great equalizer. So the same way that the ED 279 tries to treat most districts similarly based on enrollment, Maine Revenue looks at everything and then does their own valuation of each community. Because as we all know, each community values their properties differently, and they want to make sure, or they try to make sure that it's equitable across the board. So they are forced to use it, and yes, that's what they do use. Questions? So that is all I have for you on the budget.
So for those that are new, the next meetings, I understand department heads will be here, Pat, to talk about some of those increased expenditures that we see. That page that has the increased expenditures, some of them are collectively bargained, like 1 million of the salaries are collectively bargained. The benefits are the benefits, that's beyond our control. But the other things you see, we'll have discussions about each of those. I'd imagine at some point, that's what we did in the past, we kind of picked that increase overview and took that apart. Also, you'll come in with updated numbers as far as health insurance, increase, energy, that sort of stuff. So this will all move quite a bit.
So let me just respond a little bit to building administrators coming in and responding to every proposal. They can
No.
absolutely do that, but
We'd
we
be here
will also
forever.
do work behind the scenes, right? And as a collective group, we will be discussing, negotiating, speaking with staff and making some decisions. So when we come back to you, there will be some decisions that will be made that will subsequently reduce the budget. Now, that's a process. It takes time. We can't do it all at once. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. But we will do that. And then, of course, they will be present so they can ask, like, why are you asking for another school psychologist? That type of thing. Yeah.
And while you see, or while I have shared with you a 123-page budget, I have shared with Pat what's called a payroll detail. So every figure in this budget represents something. There is nothing in here that. So if I, just so that you see, the way that we do budgeting in the system is called position-based budgeting. So we budget people, we budget their benefits, and then when I run the report, what you see is every single account number that you'll see in the summary. And then you'll see the salary, the health insurance, for every single person, that makes up that figure. So it all ties to something. You know, it's the same thing with requests, with things that aren't salaries and benefits. All of these figures are tied to requests either submitted by me or by building administrators or me with Pat. So I want you to know that everything is tied to something, and there is a very large document that, my guess, if I printed the entire thing, it'd probably be close to 1,000 pages of detail of everything that is represented by this budget. And just because I am able to roll it up into one sheet or 123 sheets does not mean that there's a lot of other detail that is behind this. This is a huge process, and there is a lot of information.
And to make it really crystal clear, we do know where every penny is spent.
Yes.
We are accounted, we are responsible for that, we're accountable for it, and we do know where every single penny is spent. Even though it's 1,000 pages, that's a bit larger. I said 300, but then I thought, well, maybe 6.
If I run all the
it's-
payroll pages and
lot.
then add all of the requisition pages, I would bet they'd be close to 1,000.
And I will be sitting down with not only administrators as a group, we sit down individually with Andrea. Okay, let's walk through all of your requests. Why are you requesting? What is this? And sometimes we will find other little errors.
Yeah.
Things were
Hopefully
budgeted
not
twice and
mine.
we make those
Maybe the
corrections.
ED 279 like last year.
So,
So with that being said, any other questions on the preliminary budget that Andrea presented?
Thank you.
All right, seeing none, we'll move to C, annual audit.
So the last item is something that I want to put on your radar. It's been going on probably for too long. So as you know, we are required by the state to submit an annual our annual financial reports, our audit to the state. And that is due December 31st. So last year's budget that ended on June 30th, 2023, is due to the state by December 31st, 2023. That is the state requirement, it's in statute. Our audit is not at the state, along with a lot of other school districts. There are various reasons. The largest reason is because there aren't enough governmental accounting. There aren't enough auditors in the state, and they are all overworked. Our audit was done in the summer. He tied up his audit. Our auditor, we have two people. We have Hank that does part of it, and then we have another auditor, and they work in collaboration together. So both of them, the majority of their work was done in July and August. They each spent, I would say, together probably 3 weeks over the summer, Hank once or twice, and Peter at least once. And then Peter came back again in September, and at that point, I believed our audit to be complete, and that I was waiting for Peter to tie things up. I did not hear back, or we did not hear back from Peter until December. It was actually during Christmas break, when he had a chance to go through all of his stuff, and he asked for additional documents that I provided. So I gave him the documents with the understanding that the audit would be submitted to the state by December 31st. He did not. He then reached out again to me in January asking us for what's called Bacon-Davis compliance documents. So for those of you who have heard me talk about federal money is a wonderful thing, but federal money comes with a lot of strings. And one of the strings is with federal money is that when you are contracting for individuals, you need to make sure that these firms that are doing, the contracted companies that are doing this work, that they are in compliance with Bacon-Davis. So Bacon-Davis, I'm gonna make this really simple. They set wage amounts for every single type of work, and you need to make sure that whoever's doing the work is not paying individuals less than the amounts listed in Bacon-Davis. So these companies are required to provide payroll documents for anyone working on our projects, on our federal projects. They knew that. They were told to have them. I have never collected them. I have never been asked for them. So on January, blah, blah. So let me back up one more step. So when we realized that we weren't going to have the audit submitted by December 31st, on January 2nd, these superintendents across the state received an email of every single district in the state that had not submitted their audit.
A lot of us.
And there were a lot of districts on that list. And what I will say that this is the first time that I've ever been on this list, and I am horrified. I am just horrified. So at that point, I had to request an extension. I was promised by Peter that audit would be submitted by January 19th. When he was tying up his final audit, he saw the large ESER amounts, the contracted services, and decided to ask for Bacon-Davis compliance. I reached out to Gabe and asked for the documents. To date, I've only received documents from one of the companies. So Gabe has been after the other 3 companies to try to get their Bacon-Davis compliance documents. We have had to request another extension that expires on March 31st. Again, I am pressing these companies that we do business with to provide to us the Bacon-Davis compliance documents. What I will say is that I will never be caught in this situation again. I have said to Gabe, moving forward, that I will not pay any federal invoices for any of our contracted services that do not have Bacon-Davis compliance documents attached. I don't care how old the invoice is. They were supposed to be doing it, and they knew that they were supposed to provide it upon request. Now it's not an option. Now it's being collected. So we have another project that we're doing with ESER, with Siemens. I've asked Gabe to let them know that they can be expected to submit those with their invoices. Otherwise, they will not receive payment. In the meantime, I am waiting for 3 other companies to provide Bacon-Davis. Now, do I think that we're out of compliance? No, I don't think that for 2 seconds. What I do think is that this is a lot of work on somebody's plate that they are just poo-pooing. So it has put us in a bad place. Part of the reason why our audit, Peter was looking at our audit in December, is because every time I turn around, one of these auditors who does governmental accounting is closing their practice, or they cannot find people who want to audit governmental entities. So when somebody retires, they can't find somebody to replace, and as a result, they're kicking people off. They're kicking off clients that are not good clients. That is not our problem. When we moved to Peter and Hank, I was assured that based on our previous audits that we would be taken back with open arms. But what I will say is everybody is in the same situation, trying to get their audits through to the state. And I don't know how the state is going to handle it, because you can't, it just is what it is. But I wanted to make you aware so that you knew what was going on.
2 questions.
Sure.
How many extensions can you do?
I don't know, I've never done extensions before this year.
In our penalties outlined anywhere?
So if we do not keep following up with our extensions, so I reached out to the state and had a conversation. As long as we keep up with our extensions, there is not an issue. But if I don't keep, if one of two things needs to happen, either we need, well, one of two things is definitely gonna happen. We need to get their documents so he can submit his audit, right? And then we're done. But if that doesn't happen, we would submit another. Do you happen to know? I have never done, I have never.
I think people have done it into the following year. I have seen some school districts go into at least the following year.
I do not want to be in this
Well,
situation.
no, and as we, as I reflect on the conversation that we had about carry forward and that entire conversation we had last year is dependent upon the audit, right? We need to know how much we carry forward next year. So it's really important that we get that number so that we have the ability to accurately budget.
So I have all of those figures, but the audit is not public until Peter signs off.
Yeah.
Peter basically, I have the financial statements. So, but it is not a final audit until he signs off on it.
So Becky is not well and she is home watching and she wants to know what recourse do we have. And so she's really talking about those three companies. And, you've kept me informed about this. And I think it first became aware when I was in San Diego. So now that vacation is over, now that we're back, again, if we don't get any response, then you and I will work on a letter that will come from me and will go to their CEO or something, demanding that they provide us the documentation.
So some of these companies not only provide their own workers, but they then subcontract again. So everybody's beholden to somebody. But in answer to your question, if I just poo-pooed the state and said, we don't have an audit and I'm not gonna file an extension, then yes, they would withhold our subsidy. So yes, the penalty is pretty fierce.
As long as you keep extending it, we
I-
can work through it, but I'd rather not.
I would
Right.
rather not. I want this done. The rest of our audit was fine.
Yeah.
It was just those figures that Peter saw, those Easter figures. You need to remember that a lot of federal monies passed through here and he has thresholds. And once he was looking at those contracted service thresholds, he decided to ask for documents. Honestly, I wish he asked in August or in September or in October, not in January. So, but it is what it is. Questions? Any more about that?
No, I appreciate letting us know that that's going on, so.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
Any other comments on the audit? All right, seeing none, 3 future agenda items.
Budget. So the question that I have is, what do you want for a meeting schedule? So we don't have a scheduled meeting for next week, for finance. We have one on the 12th. Probably would be a good idea. I wouldn't mind having a couple weeks to work on this behind the scenes with administration. But I think that we should book a finance committee meeting every single week. The 12th, the 19th, the 26th, the 2nd. And we can always cancel, but it's important to get them on our agenda, on our schedule. Yeah. That makes sense? Okay. So let me. Schedule that.
So Pat, you're saying on the 12th, started every week,
Yes.
unless we need to cancel or don't have enough information or.
It's easier to schedule the time now and cancel than to be scheduling it on a weekly basis.
And that would be right through the second week of April, right?
At least, right?
Because at that point,
The
the
ninth.
second week of April, we need to sadly set our budget to be
The
able. Mhm.
The 16th is vacation, I believe.
So before
Yeah.
vacation, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Starting March 12th, yeah, every week until the 6th,
Tuesday until, yeah.
4 weeks, I believe. Maybe 3.
Sorry.
Any other future agenda items? All right, I'll entertain one last motion. To adjourn.
motion to, I can't.
Do it.
Yeah.
Good, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
You get that, Perry?
Thank you.